You're listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, featuring real business owners telling real stories about their real business experiences. Here are your hosts, John Chiappetta and Eric Jorn.
We're live, Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. We have Eric Jorn, John Chiappetta, and a special guest today.
Our guest today is Jeff Turnbull of Alternative Solutions. He's a chiropractor in town. He's been in business for over 20 years. But there is so much more to Jeff that hopefully we can bring out in our podcast today, that just a very interesting person to talk to, has some great perspectives. So Jeff, thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here with us today. And let's start off, just kind of give everybody a little bit of background on maybe how you came into being a chiropractor, maybe some of your motivations there.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor. Started a long time as a gymnast, and with that line of athletic career comes a lot of hardships, a lot of injuries. And I was 14, had a pretty severe trauma. Was laying in an ER. Two neurosurgeons overtopped me, saying, "Man, if we don't do some work today, you might not walk. You're never going to do sports again." So my folks weren't even in there yet. My coach had brought me there. So I was like, wow, that's a lot to process, right? Like, oh my gosh, I've worked so hard for this stuff. Now what? And my coach said, well, what about chiropractic? And it was like somebody scratched a record. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like this, you have a severe decompression issue going on here. We have to handle this. And so, my dad, being fairly wise, said, wait a second, let's just go get a second opinion and see what's going on. So we did. He took me to a chiropractor in Grays Lake, which was like, back then, that was, 30 some years ago, wasn't the most common response, I would say.
Right.
And I couldn't walk. My dad carried me. And within like a week, I was back on my feet a little bit.
Wow.
A month later, I was navigating, moving around a little bit. 3 months later, I was training again. And so I was like, wow, that's what because growing up, I always knew I wanted to be a doctor of some sort. And ironically, as I was growing through that process, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon.
Wow. Okay.
You're right. That's just wild. So I'm laying in front of these two people who are telling me I'll never do this again. And I go to a chiropractor, and he gives me that back to me. And so I said, that's what I want to do. I want to give people's lives back to them instead of stealing their dreams. And nothing against neurosurgeons. I have great friends that are, and they do an amazing job. But it doesn't mean that that's always the path that's right for each person.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's a cool beginning.
Yeah. I mean, in a what sometimes could look like an unfortunate process, ended up being one of the best things that happened to me.
Yeah.
I find that actually very interesting, because even when you have people coming into your office and you have so many, every person is a snowflake, I guess you could say. And so you have, somebody you might have the same general issues, but each body is different.
100%.
And so to me, to have somebody come in and be able to assess that and try to, help them go along the way is pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, it's something that grew, like when you go through school, it's like any school. I don't care whether you're in accounting or finance or medicine. It's a cookie cutter process to learn. They teach you certain things, and you realize when you get out of there, like, I don't know anything.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Now what? And then, timing and meeting people and getting into certain areas, you kind of find your niche, and you start realizing that exact thing, like, we're all just a little different. And that's the beauty of it. It's like, we're all different. And if we can just learn to figure out, why we're different and be okay with that, that's how you really get to the root of people's, health concerns, their emotional concerns. Doesn't matter what it is. Wherever you're at that point in your life is a reflection of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting talking about, you don't really learn a lot in school. You learn a lot, but until I started working with business owners and then saying, okay, here's that business situation, I didn't understand how it would translate into the numbers on, a P&L or a balance sheet. And next thing you know, I'm working with business owners. I can, they can tell me they're going to do this project, and I'm like, oh, well, you could probably make X on it. and it just comes naturally. But that's working through, learning all these different people, their different fields. Every industry is like every person's body. Like they're all different. And once you delve deeper into it, every business within an industry even operates differently, right? They have their own set of core values. How do they generate new business? How do they treat their people, their customers? Everything is different in custom. So it's really interesting how quickly I could just draw those parallels between the human body and a set of financial statements.
Yeah, for sure. Even in amongst chiropractic, like honestly, I have no idea how many techniques there are. There are so many techniques about how to really accomplish at the end of the day a similar result. And in our business, that's one of the things you brought up business. It's funny because in school they're like 50% of you are going to fail in the first year, blah, 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 blah. They went through all these things and you'll be super excited to make $70,000 a year, whatever that looks like. And so you come out with this concept that that's what's okay. And then I started to meet people in various fields that fit that model. And then I met people that didn't fit that model. And they were like, well, what are you talking about? Like, this is how you do this.
Yeah.
And then as you gravitate to kind of figure out how you practice and what resonates with you, you tend to find those people that will also business-wise help you in that process, like along the way. Because, going through school, I don't care what type of medicine you practice, there is zero instruction on how to run a business.
Yeah.
So anybody I've had several patients go on to be chiropractors and or some sort of healthcare, and they're like, what should I major in? I'm like, business. Because, I don't care how good a doctor you are, unless you can find somebody that'll take you under your wing or teach you, or you have some base knowledge there, that sets you up for failure. Even you could be the best doctor on the planet.
Yeah.
So did you go and operate your own business right out of school?
I did.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't know any different. And ironically, the gentleman that helped me when I was a teenager had retired and moved to Antioch, and he was bored. He played a lot of golf. He was bored, so he started this little practice right by what now happens to be Walgreens.
Okay.
And he's like, hey, why don't you just come up here? I'm only here a day a week. You can kind of do your thing. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's cool. So I did. And it just kind of grew from there, where I learned from him some of the old school stuff that we don't learn in school, which was great. People are like, where did you learn that? I'm like, well, I learned from this guy who learned from Gonstead, who actually was one of the founders of a modern, Palmer is based on Gonstead technique. So I had a guy that actually learned from Gonstead that taught me things that aren't taught any longer.
So that's actually pretty cool. You're talking about learning things. I go to your office. So the fact that, you always have something new. Okay. So, I think that, you do acupuncture as well. So I'm assuming you had to go back and learn how to do acupuncture as well.
For sure.
I mean, so those types of things, what other things are you doing that you might think might separate you from a different chiropractor or something of that nature?
That's a good question, because I think it's an evolution, and it's not that I don't believe, well, I guess I could start off like, it's not something that I think magically just happens. I think somewhere along the way, our energy and our bodies drive us to a new area that you're ready for. The old expression, when the student's ready, the teacher's there. So yeah, I took, 300 credits of acupuncture. It's an acupuncture, believe it or not, is probably one of the most intense educational programs. In Chinese medicine, you're usually like an OMD, which is called an Oriental medical doctor. They specialize in one aspect. Like they're an acupuncturist, or they're an herbologist, or they're tsvina, which is like manipulative. They're taught all, but they don't do it all because it's so complex. I mean, there's 400 hours of herbology to get an herbology degree. That's a lot. That's basically like twice that of a medical degree or a chiropractic degree. Wow. I mean, it's intense. So I happened to be at the right place at the right time at a seminar and met a gentleman who brought acupuncture to our country, literally, was the first licensed acupuncturist, ran the American Acupuncture Association of America, treated Harry Truman, Ronald Reagan.
Wow.
And I was like, who's the old guy at the end of the table? I was want to talk in Texas, a bunch of younger guys like myself, and then this one old guy. He's like, you don't know who that is? I'm like, no. So me being me, I was like, hey, who are you? Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, very humble man.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, I'm the so-and-so, I practice acupuncture. And He also had a chiropractic degree. And so I was intrigued. I said, oh, that sounds good. I dabbled a little bit in school. They give you a little teaser. I'm like, I want to learn that. He's like, really? Come see me. So I went for quite a few, like 3.5 years.
Wow.
Weekend warrior programs, like basically spending, 30 hours a weekend in Kansas City studying with this guy, and priceless. Like, I can't believe, again, like, things don't happen by accident. You're ready for it. Teacher's there. So I got into acupuncture that way. And I would say, like, I'm not a needler. I'm not like somebody that like is really into the Western. That's more of a Western. But what I got out of it was energy, like the movement of the body, movement of how your chi, they call it your life force, really plays a factor in that. And that's led me to perpetual reading on, what is that about? Yeah. Like, where does that come from? How do we find it? How do we utilize it? So through that process, again, meeting people and being curious enough, I've met, guys that have studied underneath Thurman Fleet who brought concept therapeutics to us and working with the emotions and how the emotions can really drive our bodies, all the way down now to where I'm digging into the fact that your reality is just a reflection of your subconscious.
Wow.
That's pretty deep right there.
Yeah.
That's really deep. It's very interesting because we talk a lot about the body. We talk about, different things that people do. We talk about diets and, how you eat and, how that affects everything that you do and everything that you are, quite frankly. So I don't know. Why don't you kind of expand on that? I mean, we're kind of talking about, we're talking about some different types of ways that we work with our bodies. I like to fast. I don't know if you want to take some time to talk about fasting. I think that to me is a very interesting topic.
Sure. Yeah. It's very interesting. And it goes back biblically, it's a very, it's nothing new. Let me rephrase that.
Right.
In the Bible, they talk about when people were ill or if somebody needed to just clear their mind and become connected to the voice. Well, we all have this little innate voice, our gut voice that tells us something's right or wrong, right? And it becomes clouded with the minutia of life. So, scripture always talked about how Jesus would go into the woods and fast for 40 days, or some of the other words that man cannot live on bread alone. Like, there's a lot of things in there that can be kind of interpreted as like, well, what does that look like? Why? And so fasting is a way that our body truly has rest. Because if you're sitting in there, if you're going to a guru and you're meditating every day, but you're eating, healthy food, salads, and you're still requiring energy to process.
Absolutely.
And true healing, like we talked a little bit earlier, but if you sprain an ankle or, you break a bone or something, you're like putting it in a cast, laying it up, resting it. Why? Because it needs that time without interface to basically heal. Yeah. Our organs of any kind, whether it's our brain, our livers, kidneys, and even every cell requires that rest to truly heal. And so when you fast, you put your body into a place where the organ systems don't have anything particularly to do from an outside source. So then they look within themselves and start to dig nutrients out of the body. And in that process, it cleanses the toxins out of our system. And then that helps our clarity of our mind process. And spiritually, it's actually very valuable. If you're not clouded in the mind, you can connect subconscious to conscious a lot more effectively.
Definitely. So how long of a fast, what would you say the minimum amount of hours or days to fast before your body's really into that state of rest, repair, revitalization?
That depends on the person. Like, again, the uniqueness. If you've never done a fast before, typically you're going to go, like I tell people, there are physiological aspects to fasting, meaning like, how do I look at my body and see what does it look like? And that usually is like 10 days. We've talked about that. Like a 10-day process is you'll see things in your body shift and change. One of them is your tongue will go from normally your tongue's like pink or some sort of, slight coloration to it. It'll get white or just gray as a color. And then it will naturally just like overnight clear up and be pink again. Wow. That's like one way to look and say, okay, well, my body has processed through a lot of the impurities that are in there, and it's now starting to become clean again. Because, your mucus, your skin, all that stuff is the way your body excretes, right? We know that largest organ of excretion is your skin. So that's one way to look at it. Now, I will also tell you, like, as you get into the process of fasting from a place other than physical realm, then you can do it in 24 hours.
Yeah.
You can become in a state, a new, I would say, trend, but it is, fairly popular now. It's intermittent fasting, where they fast like you eat 6 hours a day and you let your body just rest the rest of the time. And that is true. That's a great thing to do for a lot of reasons, like not just confidence in what your body's capable of doing, but also in giving yourself a chance to really push your boundaries on what you feel at being at ease with you.
Interesting.
It's really easy to constantly be satiated. Oh, I'm hungry, I better eat. I'm hungry, I better eat. What if I don't eat? What if I allow myself to be in that state of a little bit of uncomfortableness? Is it going to be the end of the world? No, it's actually probably the beginning of your world if you let it happen.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd assume that's part of what listening to you and Sanjay talk about when you guys do your fasts, and every time I talk to you, it's an extra day, it's an extra day, it's an extra day. Is that a lot of it is, testing your willpower?
For the most part, because food is so prominent and it's so right in your face 24/7. I don't feel like, I've never truly felt what hunger really is.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had to really go and search for food. I've been very lucky. It's always been available. So I think there's something to do with that willpower to say, oh my God, if I smell food, I get hungry or whatever. So sometimes I would try to be in a position where I didn't have to smell the food or be around it so much, because all it is walking to the cupboard and opening it up, and there's all kinds of stuff in there that, but for me, I was always trying to stay in shape, and I think a lot of that was my motivation. But I think what happened for me was there seems to be a little bit more to it for me now. I can't really identify it and I can't put it to words. But to me, to know that if I'm gonna finish eating at a certain point at night, and I know that I don't feel hungry anymore, and I don't feel anything until noon or past noon or something like that. But I never have this thing in my head where you got to eat now. That's kind of gone. Mm-hmm. And it's just taken a long time to get there, but that's kind of gone. But it's becoming something more than just physical for me. But I can't really put my finger on or say what words for that. But yeah, to me, fasting seems to be a huge thing. And that's back to my meeting. Been able to work with Jeff. Not only did I went in there because, honestly, I can't remember the exact first reasons why I came in. I mean, I've always had, some aches and pains, and I probably played every sport that I probably shouldn't have with my body. But I mean, there's so much that I've learned just from my interaction with him. So, I mean, I know that other clients, not just me, are walking into Jeff's office and have the ability to not only discuss things intelligently that he's going to be able to speak to you about. So he's got, you can talk to him. Well, while you're adjusting him, he's not in this interesting situation because he's adjusting you, but you're not. You might even be talking about small talk, but at the same time, a lot of things are going on in that room, and it's a short period of time that it happens in. But then sometimes our discussion turns into something more, and then it's all of a sudden, well, let me think about that for a little bit, because sometimes you'll drop a seed, and then all of a sudden, 3 days later, I'm like, what did he just tell me? So, sometimes it just takes a little bit to really kind of go in. And that's what's interesting to me about, I mean, I don't know a lot of chiropractors, but I will say that I've gone to other ones, and, I was always very impressed with their process. Mm-hmm. You walk in and, you sit down, and they would, they walk you through the stages of what they needed to do to make sure that they were assessing you and trying to figure out what they need to do to help you. But first, for me, there was a little bit more. There was always a little something more between the two of us that allowed me to say, hey, this is where I belong. Yeah. So I think that's always been the big difference for me. So I mean, I know this is blood, sweat, and business, but I think that, with some of the podcasts that we've done, the difference makers are the passion, right? So, I think the people that have passion for what they do and truly love what they do, I think will always be the best in the business.
Correct.
So for Eric, I know you talk passionately about some of the work that you do with the projects and how you can look at a project, boom, you see the numbers. It's the same thing here.
Yeah.
I think if there's a takeaway from today's podcast, it's, you got to do what's you're passionate for.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this, right? It seems like every person that we've interviewed, they're very passionate, and that causes them to really understand their customer, right? They take the time, they give them that personal attention. They understand them at a deeper level than just a transactional level. It seems to be a huge difference maker.
Yeah. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you really have no choice, right? If you're not in tune with that, that client walking in the door, you can't do the best job you can.
Correct. So that's a fascinating observation, but there's some interesting things to that. Like, there are a lot of people out there in every way, shape, or form that are very good at processing a patient or a client of any sort. Like, they've got it down to a science where it's, A, B, C, D, E. And that can make them a very good businessman.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, people aren't coming to you always because you're a good businessman. They come to you because they feel you. They feel what's going on with you. And that's what drives people to send people to you. Like, I have colleagues, and for nothing against this, they spend a fortune, on Facebook marketing and things like that. And it works great for them. But I'm the one talking to those guys. Why is it up and down? Why is it doing this? What's going on? What do I need to do different? And you don't ever feed that person. What I mean by that is, like, they have to be ready to hear what you have to say. And so when they're going to ask you, and you tell them, well, you love them, like, you feel them, like you engage from the moment you receive them. And that's when they come into your office here or anywhere, and they feel welcome without having a word yet, then you're doing something right.
Yeah.
That doesn't make me the best businessman. That makes me the best at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm the first to admit, like, I surround myself with the best business people so they can help me make the right choices financially and, business wise, because I know that's not my strength, but I know what my strength is. And that's the key. And that's why you guys are here, because you guys are excellent at what you do. And you're passionate about what you do. Like, you guys are spending time out of your day to do these things because it's important. You care about being the best business person that you're bringing professions in that aren't always considered business driven, but at some point are business, and helping them become better at what they do. So it's fascinating. We all have the same role when you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
Money's the easiest thing to make, right? If you think about it.
It is.
If you're doing what you love to do, and you are willing to always put yourself second in that process, it's easy. You're here on some extra time. I'm here on a day off because I really deeply care about what I do, and people getting information that can help other chiropractors and other doctors and other dentists be extremely successful. Because the worst thing is seeing somebody that is amazing at what they do, but don't believe it. And then they tend to fail out of it and end up somewhere else that isn't providing them the joy.
Definitely. It's interesting. When you talk about process, because I think people get too hung up in, like, the McDonald's, right? When you think of a tight wound process, McDonald's, fast, efficient. But what you don't think about is, right, we're very heavy on process, right? We have a certain way we work with clients. We require clients to have a certain level of input, and we require things in such a tight knit way. But that's because we want to have that margin to be able to spend the time to get at that deeper level with those clients. And if we were spending all of our time, just doing things however, no set processes, you're going to get so hung up in the work that you can't get that deeper level of knowledge. And without that deeper level of knowledge of that client and what they do, you can't be the best advisor on our end. And just like you can't be the best practitioner. So process is actually a very important thing, and it just usually has such a negative connotation to it.
And what's interesting is being in his office, the one process that I find that's different than any other office I've been to is the walk-in. Not too many chiropractors or I mean, I haven't been to a chiropractor before, other than your office, where here's my set hours. I'm going to be here. Walk in. How did you kind of start doing that versus saying, okay, you come at 2:15 and this person's going to come at 2:30? What kind of drove you to that?
Right place, right time, meeting people that were doing something similar to that, and being in clinic. Like, one of the most valuable tools that I got to experience was rotations, right? And what that did is it said, I don't want to do this. So like in that experience, I learned, like, I don't want to wear a suit and tie.
Yep.
I don't want to, force people to feel obligated to be there on my time. I want them to experience, if they're truly coming to me out of their desire, they'll show up when they're ready. And so I just created that whole process, and it kind of just started to work. And early on, it can be chaotic. He's been in there sometimes where there's 30 people in my lobby, and, you may wait 40 minutes, but there's times you can walk in and be in and out in 3.
Yeah.
And people know that when they come to see me. And that's one of the things that they value is, like, I value their time and when they're really ready to commit. And I know that I have to show up between 9:30 and 12:30 and 3 to 6 with 100% focus, and I'm not distracted one bit from that process. Outside of that, can't promise you that.
Well, you could walk into any doctor's office and wait 40 minutes for anything anyways. I mean,
if you're lucky.
And what I'm taking out of that is, you're not restricting yourself and setting up barriers to amount of time that you need to spend with somebody, because whoever walks in the door, it could be 3 minutes or it could be an hour, right? Because you're looking to get all the way down to the core cause of whatever they have going on. That's really cool. I haven't seen that before yet.
Yeah. And John's experienced it too. And in my office, we've talked a little bit about, like, I can count on my hands, truthfully, if I even said that, I might be exaggerating, how many times somebody's cause is actually why they're in my office. Like, they say they have back pain, and they'll say that, I've got this going on or whatever it may be. But when you look at them and you have a quick conversation, it doesn't take long to realize, like, that person's really got this going on internally, and you start to address that. And the body's very, very interesting. It doesn't need any help in healing. Like, we were designed that way. We know that because if, you break your arm, you put a cast on it, there is nobody out there, rubbing the wall around you to make that bone grow together. It does it. Yeah. But what it does need is it needs you as the person who's suffering from something to identify why they're actually there.
Yeah.
And that's my job, is really to do that. And then to put that information into a physical process for them. A lot of times that's using your spinal cord or vertebra or something like that to trigger, like jumpstarting your car to fire the brain to start sending signals down to an area to say, hey, I can do that. And then healing naturally occurs. There isn't a doctor on the planet, I don't care who you are, that has ever healed anybody. All they're doing is they're assisting you, that was already within you, to recognize your potential to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I've never thought of it like that. A surgeon has to go in, cut out the bad, connect the good, but guess who's doing all the rest of the work?
100%.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. There's no, and that's fascinating because, in my realm, you deal with a lot of people who, there's a lot of arrogance in the medical field.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't judge anything, but I can tell you at the end of the day, if you really sit down and look at it, none of that has been at the hands of whomever provided the process to get to that position. They're excellent at putting a bone together, or excellent at providing an adjustment or pulling a tooth out. But at the end of the day, the healing still happens from you. We know that. Like, how many times has somebody had something occur and then they end up with something else as a result? Because they never really truly addressed why they were ill, what was causing that. And if you don't remove that stimulus or address that, then, a lower back problem will then be a bladder problem or a, throat cancer, or what doesn't matter. It's going to show up in your body some way, because that's how our body talks to us.
Definitely. Yeah. I was, through the COVID pandemic, one thing that, in hindsight, I keep asking myself, I said, what a perfect time for the world to address the overall health issue that we have going on, right? We have something out here that's new. I mean, obviously you need to address whatever's happening. It's a global pandemic. It's a serious thing, But on the flip side, if you don't, the people that were affected the most were unhealthy people, for the most part. And not once did I hear, hey, there's a major medical issue going on here. It's time to take care of your health. You're right. Get moving, get some vitamin D, get out in the sun, eat better, eat healthy foods, nutrient rich foods, work on yourself first. Cause like you said, right, it's all up to the body, right? It doesn't matter who else is there, even with a vaccine or whatever it may be, right? All that's doing is telling your body what to do, and it's still up to your body. And if you're not taking care of it,
100%.
Yeah. That was one thing that always bothered me. I thought it would have been such an opportune time, and I think we missed the boat on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's several factors but the two main factors that our society is driven around quick fix.
Yeah,
like to really evaluate why we behave the way we do is sometimes challenging. It can be painful, to feel what you're experiencing. And I'm not talking physically, having COVID or anything else for that matter. I'm talking about the internal emotional battles that we have that put strain on our system. And the second is the system. The system is driven around, providing to us what they think we want, which is that quick fix.
Yeah.
But you're 100% on target. There are universal laws we know. And this is a personal opinion, backed by lots of reading and lots of studying and lots of knowing people in those places. But there are very few true physical laws. Physics is the ultimate science. Every other science around it is physics is justifying. I mean, including religion. Like if you look at religious or spiritual connections, physics is defining that. They're using that as a law. Like, well, how is it possible that we could be here? Well, the law of gravity, spiritually, the concept of eternity. Well, there's a physical law about that, right? Matter's neither created nor destroyed. So we know that there's these processes in there, and there are universal laws with our bodies. Like one of them is nourishment. Yeah. I don't call it nutrition because, there's a lot of nutrition out there that's not good for us. Yeah. That's per se, right?
That's a good point. Everything's labeled healthy now.
Yeah.
Right?
So I call it nourishment. And that means like what is feeding you at the deepest level of your cells. Like, and that sometimes is fasting. There's no food in that process, but you're being nourished. Some of it's movement, the law of movement. You have to move. Why? Because our bodies were designed to pump lymphatic, blood, nutrients, things like that's how it gets it. There's the mind body, the Qigong connection, like the state of our being, which is also universal law. You can't change that. They've proven, we know that people have died physically I had a great friend died for like 40 minutes.
Wow.
4-0. They went back in, his actually wasn't his wife because she was a mess, obviously, but his head manager had worked for him for 30 some years, said, he's not done yet. Go do it again. And he came back.
Wow.
Yeah. Wild, right? And proves that life is not physical. It's deeper than that. Well, that's that spirit. That's that chi. So those are universal laws that you can't change. I don't care who you are. They're there. But if you don't listen to them, that's when we have what we call dis-ease. It's a disconnect from our spirit, our truth. And therefore, you end up with a disease because that's the way the body says you're not communicating. You're not listening to what I'm trying to tell you. You're not allowing yourself to rest. You're not allowing yourself to be who you are. Like, interesting. How many times have you met somebody that just, you feel like they want to be able to express themselves, but they're like, they're not showing you a thing. They're not going to, hey, how's it going? Good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good. I mean, every day, how many times have you asked somebody, how's it going? Oh, it's going good.
Yeah.
But when you're in tune with it, they're not.
Yeah.
You can feel it. You're married. Are you married?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Do you need to be told when your spouse is, there's something going on?
No.
Why? Because you feel it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You could feel the tension in the room.
Yep.
Right.
And that's the truth. When you pay attention to that, when you get outside of your realm, meaning that the realm being at home and being, okay, this is my wife, these are my kids, I'm going to feel them. When you allow yourself to do that in public,
yeah,
it becomes a very interesting, It's unique.
I mean, if you're running a business, that's actually a really good skill set to have, right? Being able to read another human being is negotiation, not just negotiation, but relationship building. I mean, such an important facet of business is building relationships, whether it's with your customers, vendors, partners, whatever it may, your employees, and being able to read their physical exertion, which ties to their mental exertion at the same time. I mean, what an important thing, what an important skill set. So yeah, I mean,
it's more than just watching their body language.
Yeah, 100%. Like you actually have characteristics. Like before we started this, you were talking about like, if I have this process going on and I can't listen to Audible and I can't do this. But so right there, like based on your facial features and certain things that I can tell you, I can say you're a kinesthetic person, meaning like if I give you something and you do it, you learn it.
Yep.
And so if I'm trying to communicate to you in a sensory way, meaning like if you were a audible person and I'm saying, hey, just listen to this, I've lost you.
Yeah.
Like I have to be able to look at you and say, okay, based on what you've told me, that if I said, hey, feel this, I'll move you in a certain way. I'll put your body in a certain position. Can you feel that? Yeah. Oh yeah, I got that. Well, then I know you can reproduce the energy from that.
Interesting.
And so like in your line of work, man, if you could just sit and look at somebody and be like, hey, you're definitely this type of character, then I can communicate with you on your level. Because the only time that whenever you disconnect, or if you have a client or somebody in front of you and you just kind of feel like you keep hitting these walls, it's not a problem with either one of you. Yeah. It's you're not communicating on the same tone.
Yeah.
Like there's differences in how you're receiving each other. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah. And that's, that brings up a really interesting point, right? Accountants for the most part are visual learners, right? They take text or data or whatever it is, and they read it and they process that information. And we've understood the concept that our clients aren't the same way, right? If we send a set of financial statements to somebody, what happens to it? It goes in that desk drawer. They don't look at it because it's like, this is not how I learn and understand. So we do different things to try to change that up, right? So sometimes it might be like, hey, here's quick 5 points, right? Nice, short, easy action items. Or maybe it's, we record a video talking to them about, hey, we noticed this, this, and this. We send them a video. They can see what they have going on with an explanation from us. Or what we do with almost every client we work with is we set up an appointment. We sit down. We have that active discussion. And I think that's the, how do you say it?
Kinesthetic,
like
movement.
Yes, kinesthetic learning method is that live one-on-one discussion, working through the numbers. It might not be like tangible and taking the pen and taking it apart, putting it together, but understanding that financial data.
Sure. And the word you use, I mean, it doesn't have to be like you described, it doesn't have to be actually physically doing it. Although like if you can combine the words with physical, you'll learn a lot faster.
Yeah.
But I could just, relate to you knowing like what you guys do for work. And if you were that type of person, I could say, well, hey, if you just, if this looks like this, or it sounds like this to you, then you're going to receive it. Yeah. It's naturally going to trigger that process. And on a side note, if you're working with chiropractors or people that are manual, like carpenter, like you want to have them be able to feel their business. Yeah. Like, okay, I want you to feel what it's like to be secure financially. Like, what would that feel like to you? And then they'll describe to you in ways that you can receive and be like, okay, this person is wanting security. And what it feels like to them is it feels like I can rest and I can sit on a beach chair without having to think about what's going on at the job site or something like that. So it can really relate to no matter what business you're doing. But if you went to that same person and said, if you just listen to this book,
right.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Well, I think this all kind of brings about maybe some of the work that you're doing now. I think in my head, it's not only you're working with somebody's body, but now you're working with somebody's mind. And I don't know, I don't want to label it and say life coach or something like that. I'll let you label and describe it the way you want to. But I find that to be fascinating that, you're in your line of work and you're seeing people that you see on the day-to-day basis. And now and I don't think it's business driven for you. I think it's more like, passion, or I want to help people. So, but if you, like I said, go ahead. I mean, I'll let you discuss it. I don't want to get too far in there, but
sure.
Label it the way you want to, I guess.
Yeah. The last thing I want to be is a businessman. You know what I mean? Like, cause I know nothing about it, truthfully. Like, at the heart of my heart, it's not who I am. And so I don't choose to be that. Right. But so what you're referring to is like, we discussed a little bit about like our bodies are a reflection of our subconscious. Well, somebody said, well, how do I know what my subconscious is thinking? Look in the mirror. Like, the choices that we've made in our lives, and the things that have occurred, almost like, we've all heard of the book, The Law of Attraction, right? Like, I mean, that's such a common thing now, and there's truth to that, right? But they never say, well, why are you attracting it? Yeah. So there's a deeper level to that. And the commonality is, we all have kids. Nothing occurs without observation. Meaning, like, to me, John's heard me say this, everything's just information. There's no good or bad. It's just information. Like, how are you processing it determines how you decide to label that, right? Well, we get that from our experiences. I mean, you watch kids play and get together, and there's no judgment. There's none of that's going on. Well, at some point, where does that occur? Well, it occurs from the conscious mind looking and seeing how John and Helen are raising their kids, or you raising your children with your wife, and I'm raising my child. That rearing, that process is basically our concepts. Like, I'm going to raise my child based on what I believe I am, and your wives believe you are. And therefore, we're going to inflect that concept into that child. So that child then becomes basically a reflection of who we are. Now herein lies the issue. If we're truly unique, and we're made in the unique image of God that is completely identifiably separate, why are we always being robots of our experience? So at some point, that incongruency creates a contrast in us. Like the child that starts to pull away and wants to wear something completely different, and mom and dad are like, absolutely not, don't go get your, how can you get a tattoo? What is wrong with you? Well, that's just a belief by the parent. Yeah. And so if in healthcare, and what I do particularly is I look at approaching somebody from the standpoint of, well, here's who you really are, but who have you become? And we become something different than who we are because of those concepts. And we can address the concept, and through various processes of breathing, or ironically, I use a lot of color work with people. We can reroute the neurology. It's the word used in modern, quantum science is called neuroplasticity. Our brains really have the ability to bend around and create new pathways around an experience. A good analogy is, I mean, you guys probably all remember your first girlfriends. Maybe they wore something, or they had a perfume.
I've been told I don't remember anybody before my wife.
Smart man.
Yes, right. Me too. Unfortunately, my wife knows my last girlfriend. It's kind of weird, but anyway. So if they had something that was a prominent observation in your mind, you could be walking down the street in Chicago and get a whiff of perfume, and the first thing that's going to come to your mind is that person that you haven't seen in 40 years. That's the neural pathway. Well, the same thing happens if you watch your mom and dad constantly say, oh man, we got to watch our budget, man. Money's tight. Can't do this. We're not going to do this because this. So then you're going to feel like maybe you develop the concept that you're not valuable, or that you're not worth it. So then the rest of your life, no matter what you do, you're going to sabotage the fact, because you believe in the subconscious that you're not valuable enough to deserve to be successful. So we work on identifying that, and it will manifest physically in you. Like, we've done the work.
Yep.
Where I could have you repeat something once we kind of evaluate where you're at.
Wow.
And it will cause, like, oh my gosh, people like anxiety. That's all that is.
Wow.
Addictions. That's all that is. It's somebody kind of like trying to hide from that feeling that they're getting physically from a concept that's been driven into them. If and when you can work around that, that's when your body achieves health, because there's no longer an incongruency. Then you can be okay with being who you are.
Interesting.
We're so taught that it's not okay to be who you are. You need to be who I want you to be.
Yeah.
That's politics, frankly.
Well,
Yeah.
I think about that in our world quite a bit.
Yeah.
Financial planner or an accountant. I mean, how many of those guys want to see somebody with a sleeve of tattoos? It's true. I mean, most people don't want to see that. Maybe because for me, I don't really think about it as much, and maybe it's because as our society is kind of maybe aged. A lot of younger people, I feel like there's a lot more younger people that have tattoos. So like if somebody walked in my door and had a tattoo, I guess I don't think twice about it. Mm-hmm. But a generation ago, I mean, my dad would never have done business with somebody with a sleeve full of tattoos. He would have thought, what's wrong with this guy?
Now I would ask you the question, why?
Yeah.
Why would it? Because he had driven into him some idea that that's defamation of your body. That's not whatever reason that may be.
Yeah.
And if you can look at that perception, like to me, like I think, man, tell me about that. Tell me about what that is.
Yeah.
Because you know what? That's one way that when you're hidden and you're like trying to figure out why I'm not being able to be true to me, it's a way they express themselves. There's a story behind every tattoo.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes they're fun and wild, and other times they got a deep, psychological meaning.
For sure.
What's interesting is that's a similar concept to business owners, right? So almost all business owners have this drilled in their head. You need to make a lot of profit, right? You need to make as much money as you can. And that's why I'm in business. And frankly, it's not the truth. Now, profit is a good thing, right? Because profit makes things happen. It makes you allows you to run a better business. You can reinvest in your staff, your employees. You can be at the forefront of your marketplace. You do need profit to achieve those things. So profit's not just a dirty word. It's not like, you're taking all that money and you're buying a jet ski and, a Rolls Royce and big house, right? No, most business owners, I mean, we see how every business owner treats profit, and it's almost like profit is a path to a goal, right? So when you really understand a business owner and their mindset, you need to understand, okay, great, we have profit. What do we want to do with it? And this is actually a deeper concept that I understand now. We started working with this concept called profit first. And actually it's very popular in the chiropractor community. We have several newer chiropractic offices that we work with that are running on that concept. And they have this account called profit. And in that profit account, it's not meant to go take the money and go spend it. This is like your savings for the goals of your business. Mm-hmm. And that's what profit's for. But society wants to tell you, and, are being raised and just our life experiences that, everybody wants to be the greedy business owner making all the profit and taking it all for themselves. And it's just such a bad fallacy. And, like you said, right, it's all based on everybody's inputs and experiences over life and then how they interpreted it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't remember when, it was several years back, but I remember reading this. It was a reference to, they interviewed 100 billionaires, and out of the 100, one was happy. Yeah. I mean, we know, like, what's that guy, Steve Jobs, on his deathbed basically said, what did I do with my life? And so they realized, like, those profits, the money they're making and the processes of and engaging in that aren't really truly providing that joy. Yeah. And if people dive into the reasons why they behave the way they do and react, then they can take and use that as an asset. Like, I have a great friend of mine, passed away several years ago, young, pancreatic cancer. Oh, wow. Super humble guy, like quiet. Literally drove one of those old Subarus with 2 seaters in the back. Like, nice. I don't even know it was illegal to have, because he had like 2 seats in the back of this thing with no seat belts, right? Wow. And he'd show up to like parties and hanging out. He had old 70s blue jean jacket with a bunch of patches. So I was kind of like a hippie a little bit. Yeah. Well, when he passed away, he had $14 million that he left to his wife and daughter and charities and all these things like that. And it wasn't why he was doing what he was doing. Yeah. But he had that mentality, like, this is just something that you can use to help perpetuate who you are. Yeah. And it's like, I use the analogy, it's kind of like alcohol. When people are drinking, you're an angry drunk. And that means you're angry. Yeah. Because if you are, that's just showing who you are. If you're happy and go lucky when you're out, that's kind of what money, I believe that's what money does. It exacerbates our concepts. Yeah, that's interesting. People around that.
Huh. I like that.
I think that's pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I love the material we covered. It's awesome. like I said, we're working with a lot of chiropractor offices. So going back to that business concept, what's some unique things that you're doing inside of your office that, we talked about the hours, we talked about how you have the deeper relationships. What are some other things that you're doing that might be considered more on the unique side?
Well, it's funny because I treat a lot of chiropractors who come to my office, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're not doing this. Mm-hmm. Why would I do that? Well, because you need to do ultrasound or laser or cryotherapy or whatever. And I'm not judging any of that. I think it's all valuable because, again, if somebody believes it works, it does.
Yeah.
It's good for that person. But they come and ask, why do I not do that? Like, you walk into my office, and if there happens to be nobody there, you're in and out of my office in a minute and a half or 2 minutes. Why? Because I don't need to rub the wall to turn the light switch on.
Yeah.
I know that the business of what I do is the efficiency of the practice. Like when you walk into my office, I don't think about anything else, and I don't need to because I have great staff up front.
Yeah.
I have processes in place that I've worked through and developed that allow me to efficiently process patients through the office to where they feel like they were there for an hour. True, yeah. Right? I mean, you could be in there a minute and just be like, man, that was amazing. Like, there's no concept of like how many times you waited in line at Great America for 2 hours and be like, that was it?
Yeah.
So like when you can wait in line for a minute
yep.
and still feel like you were there all day, then you're doing something right. You're putting their emotions first, their love, you're loving that. And so when people come in and say, you don't do all these things that we all do,
yeah,
how do you do that?
That's interesting. I think about when I go to a doctor's office, right? Every time I walk in, no matter how many times I've been to that doctor's office, okay, fill out the input paperwork. Okay, go sit down here. My appointment's at 9:00. It's 9:15, still waiting. Okay, now the nurse is going to take you back, and then they're going to do all the standard stuff. And the doctor comes in for about 2 minutes. And I think about it myself. I'm like, okay, I know this is going to cost a lot of money, and he was in here for 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is that? But it sounds like you've created an experience that is just such a smooth ride for whoever walks in the door.
Yeah.
That it's like, you don't have to worry about, it. And that actually what that I think is that's creating value, right?
100%. Like, you're businessmen.
Yep.
You know what the most valuable thing you have is your time.
Absolutely.
Because without time, you can't do anything that you enjoy doing, right? Like whether it's doing your work or recreating, finding the quiet time you need to stay fresh for the patients or your clients. So like talking about profit and reinvesting, like yep. I have the most advanced software you can have for what we do. Most people look at it like, how do you do that? I mean, it has facial recognition.
Wow.
Now we turned it off during COVID because, with masks, it was screwing my whole process up. But we also have like a merchant card, we call it. Like, it looks like a credit card. Mm-hmm. When that gets swiped, it registers the patient in my office. It tells me exactly what I've done. It pulls up all their records. It tells me what I need to focus on. And so before they even walk in my office, if there's something I need to address outside of just paying attention to them,
yeah,
it's going to tell me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it automatically processes, then submits to an insurance company and auto post.
Yeah.
So like I can do what I do without my staff having to go up there and, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? They can look at you and say, hey, good to see you again. Come on back.
Yeah.
They're putting you first.
Yeah. I will say that when somebody walks through the door, they don't look at a card. Everybody knows everybody's name already.
100%.
Yeah.
So to me, that's
huge.
It's speaking of something that's unique. I think, there could be a day in our accounting office, I might not know who that person is, but I walk into Jeff's office and the front people and they call you out by first name.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's sometimes huge. Give you a hug or a high five or horse around a little bit, but they know you as people because they don't have to think about all the other stuff.
So then this software, brings up an interesting point. Probably the most painful part of your business is dealing with insurance companies, insurance billing and coding and all that nonsense. So this software sounds like it's really streamlined that to you. It keeps it simple and it gets you out of the process.
100%.
That's huge.
Legitimately. My girls are involved in a lot more than I am.
Yeah.
Obviously there are always hiccups here and there, like something happens, insurance companies are different, coded different or something. But the folks happen to know the couple of gentlemen that designed the software, and they were all medical review experts. Some of them Medicare review boards, which are really tough to be. Like if you're a doctor that's reviewing medical records, you know all the laws backwards and forwards. Yeah. And so they went through this process and they streamlined how we can eliminate mistakes.
That's awesome.
Like how do we go through and say, okay, if this pops up, it flags you. It won't let you go any further unless you put this number in here.
That's
and
awesome.
so you know prior to that, which is a patient experience, because the last thing you want to be like, oh man, why did I get a $400 bill?
Yeah.
I have insurance because it didn't process it right? You know? So that it is very streamlined, and it's, you know, like all of them are these days, they're all like cloud-based. So you can go and adapt to it. But I will say, like, I've had the opportunity to get to know people that have run some of the, you know, ChiroTouch, some of these other software companies that are well known in the business, and they're hiring the guys that did our software to do some of their integrations. Wow. Because they're that far ahead of the game.
Yeah.
You know?
That software, what is it a public software or anybody else can go sign up for it and become a customer?
Sure. It's called Innate EHR. Interesting, innate, like meaning like it does things for you that you don't have to think about. I mean, maybe that's why you call it that. Yeah,
we'll have to make sure to link set a link, because I mean that sounds like a great solution.
It's very incredible. Like even Ty, I got a young guy in my office now. I was there on the days that I'm not, and in a very short period of time, with a little effort, has like navigating how to do his own billing. He's in his office by himself, seeing 50 people a week.
Wow.
I mean, the average chiropractor sees 50 people a week.
Yeah.
He's been in business 3 months and is doing that.
Wow.
And he's able to keep up with the billing and all that jazz because it's click, 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 you're done.
So you can quick start a new associate just like that. That's huge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's intimidating as a doc, as you know, coming out of school, you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do all this? When I started, I hand typed my HICFAs. I'm not kidding. Well, the good part was I learned exactly why you do it and how to do it.
Yeah.
But I would never want to go back there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You do got to learn the basics, the building blocks. But then, you know, at a point in time when you switch from a doer to a knowledge worker, which I'd consider you need to have that free time to be able to just focus on that and that clarity instead of spending the time, you know, typing the data in. And that's the beautiful thing with software and automation is that it's really allowing us to become better knowledge-based workers.
For sure.
What's it like having an employee? So is this your first associate under you?
It is.
Yeah. Talk to us about that. And we'll make sure to keep them off. We won't send them the link to this podcast.
Yeah, no, it's all good. He's a stud. He's a great guy. Like cool. I've had many people come ask me, hey, can I come work for you? Can I, you know, and it just never felt right. Like I'm a big person to listen to my body, like feel it. Do you feel it? Don't you feel it? Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, like being your own business and being in business that long, you've kind of developed like an emotion to it. Like it has become who you are. And so letting anybody into that place is a challenging environment. And I knew that it was right. Like I could feel it when he came in. I mean, it wasn't by accident. His dad was a patient. I didn't even know this kid. He's like, hey, can my son come, you know, follow you? I'm like, oh, he's thinking about going to school. He's like, well, he's going to graduate in a year. I'm like, really? I didn't even know your son was in chiropractic school. He's like, yeah, send him up. Take a look at him. And we, you know, chatted a little bit, and he came back a second time. He was driving from Davenport on his day off from clinics to come up to watch. And he's like, I can't believe, like, I've been told this can't be done.
Yeah.
But I've always known it could. And this is how you're doing it. I love the simplicity. You know, there isn't a thing in my office that doesn't serve a purpose.
Yeah.
If there is, it's gone. I'm not attached to it. So he's like, I love this. And so I said, well, if you're serious, come see me. He drove every week from Davenport.
That's amazing.
For 6.5 months.
Wow.
While he was finishing his rotations.
Wow.
And then when he graduated, it just worked out that, you know, I'm only there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Mm-hmm. And it's been amazing. Like I meet once a week with him and we discuss cases. We talk about, you know, the work, some of the different stuff that I do that obviously he's never been exposed to.
Yeah.
And he's just a sponge. He's gravitating to it. Cool. So it really, truthfully, it's been a blessing. And he's young and energized. So that lit a fire into my rear end to start to do something like, I'm, you know, if you look like, I have a Facebook page through work. I couldn't tell you what it is because I don't even friend my own Facebook page. I just don't use technology really. Yeah. And that's my mind I'm very much in tune with nature and stuff. So that's how I regenerate. So he's come in and done all these things. And man, we did a wine walk, which I didn't even know happened in Antioch. It was a blast. I met a ton of people. And so like, he's getting me engaged and getting this information out to people a little bit more. So it's super fun. I'm having a good time doing it. So it's been such a great relationship in that way. And at the same time, then I can feed somebody that is willing to learn some of this stuff, because truthfully, I mean, maybe it's my own opinion, but I've experienced it, and you have too. There is nothing better than finding out who you are and living that life. It's freedom. It's true liberation from having to be fake, in my mind.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the transition time? So, like, obviously, I mean, you at some point in time, we all retire. What is that? I mean, I think it's interesting is the length of time that you look at working with this gentleman before you would say, okay, take over my clients. I mean,
the biggest failure in any medical practice, I don't care what discipline it is that, like, doctors will be like, hey, come on into my practice. I'll work here for a year. I'll start phasing out, and then we'll switch over. That's not how it works. Like, I've never seen it be successful. So 5 years is a minimum.
Okay.
And a good friend of mine who I've known for a long time, he went 10 years with his associate. And here's the cool part. In that 10-year period, they went from a single standalone office, which my friend had, to developing a second facility.
Nice.
And then his associate or contractor, together they ended up hiring another student that they trained to work one of those. So at the end of the day, when he sold his practice to this younger gentleman, they had 2 separate clinics. So now what I've always looked at thinking that'd be amazing. Can you imagine being able to go away for 2 or 3 weeks to Australia or whatever like that?
Yeah.
And have somebody be able to do and take care of your patients the way you do? Well, I'm just experiencing that. You know, for somebody to come in and have a practice that's set up that way, oh my gosh, that's freedom.
Yeah.
And that's what he's going to experience. He's going to experience the ability. Our goal is something like that, where, like, in 5 years, you know, we've developed the ability to have somebody else have a second facility somewhere.
Yeah.
To be able to grow, and then he'll be able to have some freedom to watch his. I mean, I've been able to be at everything my daughter has done with my hours, and that was the premise behind cutting back to 3 days a week. My wife works Thursdays and Saturdays, so somebody has always been with my daughter.
Cool.
And I wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah. So, like, I want him to have that experience, because he just had his first baby a couple months ago.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's one of the interesting concepts of scale. It's almost like the more you scale, the more freedom you get as a business owner. And a lot of it is because you start setting up these processes, you find the right people, you build the right infrastructure, and next thing you know, you can step away from that business and you can go to Australia for 2 or 3 weeks and completely tune out. It's hard to be completely tuned out as a business owner, but you can get pretty close to it. But if you're running a really small shop, unless you're willing to shut that thing down for X amount of time, and a lot of business owners, because of fear of loss, don't want to do that. They don't ever take it.
Oh, 100%. The word you used right there that drives everybody, not just business owners, is fear. Yeah. Like, our decisions we make are based on 2 words, fear, love. Like, every word that can describe who we are is one of those subsidized. Like, you know, grace, joy, those fall under love. Like fear, anger, you know, those are all under that fear state. We're making our decisions based on those 2 things at some point. And if you can gravitate to letting go of or have a system in place that allows you to let go of fear, then you know that you can go, and the person that's going to manage your baby loves those people. So you feel safe. You feel good. That way you come back refreshed.
Cool.
Well, I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much for coming. I think that's probably a pretty decent spot to stop.
Awesome, man.
But we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and being here. So that was awesome.
Thank you. Super interesting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it too.
Yeah, I just feel like I got such a different understanding walking out of here of you know, just my perspective of looking at things. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, truthfully, and it's ditto to me too. You know, I'm so grateful for what you guys do, because it keeps me being able to do what I do.
Absolutely.
That's the goal.
Yep.
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
You have been listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. You can hear more real stories from real business owners about what it takes to make it in business by subscribing to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you like what you hear, leave a review and a 5-star rating. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs and Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com.